Hello, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you a masterclass on how to tell stories that convert. How can you use stories to scale your personal brand, your business, and your career? As you all know, in this age and time, people no longer just want to buy what you do. They want to buy why you do it. They want to understand your values. So storytelling is indispensable. It's something that you need to learn and hone the skills on how you can tell stories to make people connect with you. How do you come up with your brand story? How do you come up with the frameworks to tell stories that make people reach out to you and say, this person gets it. That's the person I want to work with. So I'll be going into all of that in this video. I want you to sit back and enjoy. You may want to connect, share, and comment on this video so that other people can discover this channel. So let's jump right in. The first thing I'm going to talk about is your brand story. How do you craft a brand story? It's very important that as you begin to put yourself out there, as you begin to build a personal brand, there is a framework for you to follow to come up with a brand story. So I'm going to share that framework with you and then give you an example to go with it. Now, if you want to come up with your brand story, you have to, first of all, really come up with an obstacle, right? All of us in our life, there's something at one point or the other. No matter how smooth your life is, you can definitely think about some of those instances where you've had to overcome a struggle, you've overcome an obstacle. So the first point of saying is like, okay, what is the obstacle? Which obstacle did you face, right? So for example, now for me, if I want to come up with a brand story and I think about an obstacle in my life, I can talk about the rejections I faced when I was trying to get into the university and I was rejected for 5 years. 5 years, I was writing the exam over and over. So that's an obstacle, right? Then the next thing is, what is the internal struggle? And using the story now that I'm building up, I can say the internal struggle for me was the feeling of inadequacy, the feeling like I was not good enough, the struggle, the feeling like, oh, wow, how come I'm struggling every year for 5 years to get into the university when some of my mates have gotten and even graduated? So that was the internal struggle. What is the external struggle? The external struggle have to do with people making fun of me. People were saying all sorts of things. A lot of people will come and say, you don't want to go to school. Why are you wasting your time? Without understanding that it was beyond you, right? Then the next thing is, what was the change event? What happened? At what point did something change? So the change event was like, oh, finally I was admitted. Finally, I got into the university. And then the spark was that I got into the university, which is like the next step. I got into a course that I did not want to do, right? I wanted to go and do pharmacy, but I was admitted into plant sciences and technology. And then the next step is the guide. I'll now tell you about when I met a mentor that became the person who helped me to see this course differently, the person who helped me to believe in myself, the person who helped me to go from the average student who was struggling to graduating as overall best in the school. And then the final step of your brand story is the result. What is the result? I finished as overall best. I went on to get my master's degree, moved to the US to get a PhD. You see how that story flows? That story kind of follows a framework where you are pulling people in every step of the way. That's the whole point of telling a story. So when you are telling a story, you have to be able to give room for that aha moment. You give room for that moment of like, oh, wow, something changed. Then what did you do? Right? So it's very important that when you are writing, especially when you are writing for a platform like LinkedIn, storytelling is a big part of it. So the next thing I'm going to cover is, what is the difference between storytelling and story marketing? Most of the time, people use them interchangeably, or they even think they mean the same thing, but they don't. Because even though they are both stories, both of them serves a different purpose. So what am I trying to say? When you are telling a story, just like the one I just told, storytelling are usually meant to inspire. They are meant to lift people up. Sometimes they are meant to educate. They are just meant to encourage. That is really the function of storytelling. So it's part of your brand because you're trying to get people to know you. So storytelling helps people to get to know you. They see you walk them through some of the life events that you've been through, some of the challenges you've overcome, how you dealt with it. It's a big part of your brand, but that's not all of it. If all you do for your personal brand is tell stories, you may never be able to scale your brands to anything greater. That's just the given, right? So it's important that as you tell stories, maybe in a week, if you are posting 5 times or 6 times, you can tell stories once or twice at most. For me personally, most times I tell stories maybe just once in a week, maybe on a Monday. Either I'm giving a motivational post, or I'm using that like a story, which is still a motivational story to just share with my audience. So stories do not have any, you are not, the call to action that you are hoping to get from people is not necessarily for them to buy anything from you. It's just, know me, this is who I am. That's the whole point of storytelling. But story marketing, on the other hand, is you trying to get people to respond a certain kind of way. So you are telling people about a product or a service. You are still telling stories regardless, right? And it's usually more compelling. That is why you see big brands like Coca-Cola, like Apple. They will never tell you about Coca-Cola. Instead, they tell you about the experiences. For example, they'll tell you about families having fun. They'll tell you about the way they are changing the world and things like that. You know, Apple tell you about changing the world all the time. So you are bringing people on a journey. But the whole purpose of story marketing is to get people to respond a certain way to a product. Like for me, for example, when I'm talking about my LinkedIn Elevation program, I can tell you a story about how a participant transformed their journey. I can point at someone and I give you an example. I say, oh, wow, this person started, this was a challenge they had, this is how they ended up. It's a story. I'm not necessarily coming to say, buy this from me or do this, but just from that story, I may be able to trigger in you the desire to say, how can I be a part of this? How can I join your community? How can I become a part of this process? That is the purpose of story marketing. So it's that art of selling without selling. It's very subtle, right? Because people don't like to be sold to. Most of the time, people want to feel as though they reached a conclusion by themselves. So your job as someone who is scaling your career or your business is to just be that guide to help them to navigate. That's the whole point of it. So it's very important that as you're building your brand, you are very intentional about learning how to tell stories, both brand stories, having like a brand story that really expresses you to the world, that helps people to just look at you and say, oh, wow, I can connect with this person. I can relate with them. These are their values. And then when it comes to storytelling or story marketing, have a plan. It's always very important to have a structured plan. So I'm also going to give us one more framework, right? There are quite a number of them. And I'm probably going to do this as a series. So this is just like a freestyle as usual. There's a lot of frameworks to write stories depending on what you're trying to write. So another framework that I'm going to give us is the ideal framework. So I'll give us that framework and then I'll wrap it there so that this video doesn't go beyond 10 minutes. And then maybe in a follow-up video, I'm going to talk to us about more framework like the core framework, the pure framework. There are so many of them. So when you want to use the ideal framework to write a story, the I stands for introduction. So you are trying to create a scene. You're trying to describe something that is happening. So you create a scene like you're trying to say, oh, wow, once upon a time or in this time or 2 years ago, 6 months, whatever it is, you are painting a picture. One important aspect of storytelling is for you to be able to paint a picture so that people can feel like they are there. How can you take me on a journey such that when I'm reading what you wrote or when I'm listening to you, it feels as though I was there in that moment. I can picture it in my mind. So that's the introduction, starting with a very strong hook. So having a strong hook is important. And I'm not talking about clickbait. I know that clickbait, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking like a strong hook that pulls people in. And so once you have your introduction, the D is like the dilemma. Dilemma is like challenge, the problem, what happened? What am I describing? What is the challenge? What are some of the things that has gone on, right? And then when you look at the E, for example, the E talks about the emotion. What is the emotion? What did you feel as a result of what happened? Oh, this challenge happened. I went through this situation. What did I feel as a result of it, right? And then the A is the action. What is the action? What action did I take? And then the L is the lesson that I learned. So I'm going to quickly wrap up with a story to just tell you how the ideal framework, how it works. I think I've written a couple of stories using this framework. For example, one time I made a post and I said, this picture was taken barely 1 hour after I had an open abdomen surgery. That's a strong hook, right? So that's something that gets your attention already. The picture itself is a hook. The opening line again is like, oh, okay, it's just 1 hour after surgery. That's an introduction. And then I went on to describe the dilemma, the challenge that I had woken up from surgery because the anesthesia had failed. They didn't know that the anesthesia was not working. The doctors, the nurses, they didn't know. And then I woke up in so much pain. I was in so much pain, and that's like the dilemma. The emotion I felt was that pain was something that I'd never felt before. I felt like this was the end of the world. And then I wanted them to call my mentor to come and pray. It's like, that's the action. Like, call him. He needs to come and pray. Let him come and pray for me. Right? And then the further action was like, after he prayed, he cracked a joke and then I laughed. When I laughed, he took the picture, because the picture I'm describing, I'll probably put it in this video so it makes more sense to you what I'm saying. So the picture is of me who just came out of surgery and I'm laughing. And the reason I laughed was because he said something that made me laugh. Now, what is the lesson? What makes it important? The fact that I'm laughing, does that mean anything? But the lesson is that no matter the pain you are going through, you can always choose to respond with positivity. And no, positivity does not take away the pain. It just gives you the strength to power through. Do you see how that story, I wrote that story on LinkedIn, it went viral, more than 1,500 people engaged and countless comments or something along those lines. I'm not sure again, but I know it went viral and it's still going viral. Why does that story connect with people? It's not, the reason that story connects is because it took people on a journey. You can really begin to see where it started, what the next step was, how I responded, and now this is the lesson I'm leaving you with. I'm telling you that no matter what you are going through, choose positivity. Just choose to be positive. Choose to stay with high spirits so that you will have the strength to survive it. So these are just ways. It's always important that when you are taking people on a journey through story, be intentional about having a beginning, have a high point, always have a lesson. What did you get from it? What should the person who is listening to you take from this? So I hope this has been great for you. And if you're still watching up till this point, make sure you've subscribed. Let me know if you want me to do a part 2 of this video. Like I said, there's a lot of frameworks to write stories. And when you begin to intentionally practice them, it improves your copywriting skill. Copywriting is indeed a very important skill for you to have when you are building a personal brand in this age and time. It makes it easy for you to even begin to use AI tools. Because if you don't know how to write and you just want to focus on garbage in, garbage out, your content would not sound natural. That's just the thing. It's just going to sound AI generated. So it's very important that as you're using AI to make things easy for you, you need to also have a way to write so that your prompting and even the way you are editing and distilling it down is going to be easier for people to read, and they just like, wow, I want to work with that person. I hope this helped you. And if you're not connected to me, feel free to connect and I'll see you on the next one.